Okay, I think we'll get started. Firstly, good afternoon, colleagues, and a very welcome to the 2022 AGM for the SRFU. My name's Patrick Craig. I'm the Honorary Secretary of the SRFU, and in my day job, I work at the University of Leeds. My role for the first part today is very much procedural. I'm going to sort of guide us through the AGM for the next 20 minutes or so. So you're going to hear from our President, Bob Reeves, you're going to hear from our Chair, Mark Hyman, and our Treasurer, Stuart Wade. There'll be an opportunity for a little bit of audience participation as we go through the approvals of our auditors and the officers and trustees of the SRFU, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to ask us any questions to any of the speakers before we close. You'll have noticed from the minutes of the 2021 meeting that we managed to get through the AGM in 20 minutes. That is our intention to try and get through the first part of today as quickly as we can. We've got a fabulous speaker, a fabulous panel of guest speakers to follow immediately, and we want to give them as much time as possible to talk, and then for you guys to ask any questions you might have. So I'm going to begin with the formal opening of the AGM, and we're here today because we're required by our governing documents. So we're a company limited by guarantee. We also have charitable status and are required to have an AGM before the 31st of July each year, which is why we're here today. You'll see some of the housekeeping on the screen now. So just to be aware that the session has been recorded. When we do ask for your participation in sort of acknowledging our recommendations, we're just going to ask that you use the hands up sign, and colleagues on the call will note those down. If you would like to ask a question, if you just put it in the chat, and then we'll work through those straight away. So I think that's everything from me at the time being. We have one apology, and that's from Daisy Hopkins, who is one of our trustees. She sadly can't make it today. We've had no conflicts of interest sent through, so we'll note that. And then I'm just looking for, you should have had the minutes of the previous AGM sent through. If you just look at the very bottom of them, it does talk about our recommendation that we're going to bring some additional trustees onto the trustee board throughout the course of this year. So they were for student game representative and a female game representative. I'm delighted to confirm that we did manage to make 4 successful appointments in those roles, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in due course. So before I move on and pass on to Bob, can I just see a show of approval for the previous minutes, please? That's great. Thank you very much. Bob, I'm going to pass over to you now.
Okay, I hope I'm there now. Welcome, everybody. It's tremendous. After a couple of years of such difficult times, we've now returned to the university game with a bang. There were over 32,000 players registered with BUCS this year, playing 2,117 fixtures across 46 leagues in BUCS over the season. And it's fair to say that the student game is the only part of the adult game in rugby that's continuing to grow. I think that is probably the biggest number of games we've had in BUCS over any season. And of course, as we know, the men's game is struggling a little bit at adult level. Women's rugby is doing really well, and the student game continues to thrive, which is terrific. The end of the season saw 2 excellent finals played at Worcester Sixway Stadium, Exeter winning the Super League for men and Hartpury winning the Women's National League. It was great to see an England students team going out again this year, and it was delivered after a tremendous camp with an excellent management team. And England beat France with the last kick of the game at Kingston Park 16-15, and it was really a tremendous credit to the student game. And congratulations to all the players and all those involved behind the scenes who made it so successful. Darren Fern, the head coach, and his coaching staff have done a really good job. Again, it's been difficult for them over the last couple of years. Paul Beatty, Andrew Kennedy,
Oh, Bob, you still there? We've just lost you for a second.
again now.
Yeah, you're back.
Am I there? I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I was just saying that Paul Beattie is stepping down as team manager of England students, having done a tremendous few years, obviously struggling with the last couple, but he's been a really excellent student team manager, and thanks to Paul for all that he's done. I've been involved in this SRFU as a coach, chairman and president, and I can honestly say it's much better run now than it's ever been. And the reason is that it's more inclusive and involves more young people, and it's more diverse. The committee right now is a really excellent committee reflecting student rugby, and I must say I've been really impressed by the young people who've come on to make a real contribution to the student game behind the scenes. The two who are leaving this year are old friends of mine who have done a wonderful job with student rugby. Stuart Wade has been treasurer and trustee of the Student Rugby Union since 2014. His whole career has been in student sport at Liverpool. And under his leadership and financial management, we've managed to keep the SRFU just about solvent over these last few years. So thanks, Stuart, for all you've done. Yeah, I know that when Derek Morgan handed over the role to you, he said, the money mustn't go just to the big universities, make sure small universities do well. And that's seen over £40,000 in the last couple of years going grants to less prominent universities in the game, universities we want to help and see do well. Phil Atwell joined the Student Rugby Union while he was Director of Sport at Exeter University, and Phil was chair of the Bucks Senior Advisory Group for Rugby Union, and he joined the chair of discipline, and he also helped establish a proper discipline structure involving Bucks, the RFU and the Student Rugby Union. He then came on to chair the Student Rugby Union and represent our game, the student game, on the RFU Council. Phil led the organisation for 3 years and stepped aside and has still been our council rep since then. And he's stepping aside from the council now. And Phil and Stuart, I want to thank you for all you've done. It's been a tremendous contribution to the game. Phil's stepping down from the student council as representative on the RFU council to have his place taken by Mark Heineman, who is our chairman. And I know Mark will make a great contribution at the top end of the game. So the two reps next year on the RFU are Phil de Glanville and Mark Heineman. Phil, you might not know, captained England at rugby, and he's on very high-level committees on the RFU, on the professional game board, and on the board of directors. And also on the RFU, and representing us on World Rugby on their board, is Jonathan Webb, who also came through the student sector onto the RFU. So we're really well represented at the top end. Thanks very much to all the trustee board and the full committee for their efforts over the whole season and in the last difficult few years. And I finally would like to say, Elisa, you've done a great job behind the scenes. You're a terrific administrator, and you're the only paid person supporting the Student Rugby Union. And I hope you'll continue to support us for a few more years, because we really do appreciate your contribution. That's all from me. I hope you have a really excellent meeting, and I will enjoy it with you. Thank you very much.
Bob, thank you very much for those brilliant words. Now I'd like to invite forward one of those young people that Bob referenced, our chair, Mark Hyman.
Thanks, Paddy. Not so young anymore, but thanks for the kind comments. I'd just like to take colleagues through the chairman's report for this year, 2021-2022. But as always, I just want to take the opportunity to remind colleagues what the Students RFU is. We will have new people on this call, maybe for the first time. So as Paddy said, we're an independent limited company with charitable status. That means we are in our own right governed by the Charity Commission. So we've got lots of policies and procedures we have to stand up towards. I always say we're an extended department of the RFU as well. You'll see in the Treasurer's report, we get a grant from the RFU to deliver rugby development objectives and activity. We have 128 member clubs and a new affiliation process that we implemented last year has really aligned that so we members know who we are and we know who they are, so we can communicate with them accordingly. The governance of the SRFU is broken down into 3 levels. So there's a trustee board, and we're responsible to ensure we've got compliance against charity law, ensure the SRFU is acting in the best interests of our charitable objects, and we manage our resources fully, responsibly. There's the full committee. They're effectively responsible for delivering the plan, coming up the plan for student rugby over a 2 to 3 year period. We work really closely with the RFU and Bucks on that plan. And then we have the subcommittees where there's lots of activity that happens every year. And those 4 subcommittees that we have up and running for next year are governance, player development. We have club development and a new subcommittee for EDI. So what makes us up? I'm not going to spend too long talking about that, but as we said, the 128 clubs, those matches, the players involved in the game. We have 15 volunteers, and we work really closely with the RFU and Bucks to deliver rugby to the sector. What have we done in the last 12 months? So the first thing we did this year was introduced a new affiliation process. We didn't know who our members were, and we had no real process in place. So we worked closely with Bucks to introduce that process in. And we know who you are now. We ran our annual awards, which were released a couple of weeks ago. The grants program we ran as per normal around a learn and play theme, really around about getting the game back up and running. Unfortunately, we've had to deal with a few off-field discipline matters, and the SRFU's role is to deal with off-field matters. Your local bodies will constituent bodies will deal with on the field. We've had 4 quite significant incidents this year, and we work closely with the RFU discipline team to support those matters, and we'll continue. That will be one of our big campaigns for next year around pitch side behaviour along with the RFU. As Bob touched on, we delivered the England Students French Universities fixture. We kicked off our work around inclusive rugby, and I'll talk a little bit about that more. And we had a face-to-face rugby forum for the first time, which again was the focus around EDI, but it was great to have colleagues together just before the Bucks finals. So it's been a busy year. But more importantly, what people want to know, and I'm sure why many have come today, is to find out what we're doing next year. And there's really 5 big bits of work that we're looking to drive forward on behalf of the game next year. One piece of work that has actually started off is we've commissioned a higher education rugby pathway review. So what does that all mean? So we've commissioned a consultant called Neil Tunnicliffe to take an independent view on the higher education rugby and how it can contribute towards the Winning England strategy as part of that England rugby ecosystem. It will deep dive into the current picture of higher education rugby, what we're delivering as a sector, and as Bob said, we're in a really strong position at the moment, and it will also the aim is for it to come out with a set of recommendations to take to colleagues within England rugby and how the higher education game can support the player pathway within England rugby. We're doing this through a couple of mechanisms. So we at the current stage we're doing a whole lot of desktop research. So reading strategies, reading plans within England, other home nations, to look what they're doing and trying to build up that picture of what higher education looks like. We then intend to go and talk to the game. So we are launching a survey in the coming weeks to players to get their opinions on higher education rugby, why they came into the game, what level they're playing for, whether they feel it's a genuine pathway option around that dual career for them. And then there'll be a set of individual and group stakeholder sessions where we want to go and speak to specific people, both in the RFU and within within universities. That's a really exciting piece of work. It's going to be a busy summer because we're aiming to submit a first draft of that report to our trustee board in around about September, October. It will then get shared across the various committees and to the game after that point, and with a set of key recommendations that we recommend that are taken forward. The other bit of exciting work that is already in trailers around our women's, around England Rugby Women's 20s. So we've been working really closely with Amy Turner over the last few months, and we've Amy's come up with a plan around delivering a talent ID program for female players who are eligible for the under 20s program. I'm not going to talk too much more about that at the moment because Amy will probably talk about that a little bit later. But it aims to be delivered in around about October to November. The other big part is around the launch of our EDI University Club Toolkit. So we have sent out expressions of interest or accepting expressions of interest from universities who wish to be part of the pilot, and also under our new leadership, Mel, who you'll meet in a little bit. We're going to be setting up a new steering group to help steer the sector and the SRFU around the EDI agenda. England students will be back in 2023. It's still not a fully funded part of the aspirational programme due to the position of the England Rugby at the moment, but Trustee Board have committed to running another fixture out next year, and we're in discussions with the French about hosting an away fixture with them. Having spoken to the management team, the aspiration at this stage is to try and run an England students camp in January period, and then the actual fixture post the Bucks final. And then I know I'm tight on time, and we only promised 20 minutes. But the last bit I want to flag is around the launch of two grants that were our grants program for next year. So the Learn program, which is predominantly around workforce development, launches this July. So keep a watch out in your emails for that. So basically, there's an opportunity to get coaching staff, colleagues, volunteers onto coaching courses over the summer, so they're ready to contribute to university rugby in the new year. And then there'll be a second strand called Play that will open up in around about September, and that will be focused around intramural activity and transition of players between school, college, uni, and community clubs. I think that's me. Sorry,
Thank you very
Paddy.
much, Mark. No worries. Sorry for talking over you. That's great. Thank you. And then in his final Treasurer's report as an SRFU trustee, I'd like to invite Stuart Wade forward. Please, Stu.
Thank you. Thank you, Paddy. I hope everyone can hear me. Well, I'm not quite dressed up in the tie as Bob and Mark were, but I suppose when it's in person next year, I'll certainly make that effort to come along. But I'll just take you very briefly through what was a very quiet year. As we all know, 2021, as we all lived through it, was a particularly inactive year with little happening in the world of sport, certainly on a competitive level. We got some rugby towards the end of the year, post-Easter last year in some way, but it didn't make up for what we'd been through. Consequently, our finances didn't really significantly change over that period of the year 2021. Our financial year runs out at the end of June. And obviously this is the accounts we're presenting for the year that finished last June the 30th in 2021. We did, we're very lucky to receive the support we get from the RFU. We received 6,500 in RFU grants income, and that I think was a really essential connection that allowed us to keep with our members as we awarded a number of grants which wouldn't be the normal kind of activities that were benefiting in that way. This was literally trying to keep some clubs going in some way. So perhaps, you know, the grants we awarded and the support we received in the RFU in the year 2021 will be seen to be amongst the most important we've ever had, because we did manage to try and help some clubs at least do something, and those nascent clubs to try and keep them going throughout the year. We spent nearly 30,000 the whole year. You know, that in itself tells you a little, quite a lot about, you know, the type of year it was, because normally we'd spend over £50,000 supporting the student game. And Mark mentioned before that this year we resurrected the club development day and the day of the Bucks final at Worcester, and of course we supported the English students game up in the northeast. And so, you know, I can tell you now that, you know, although last year we spent very little, you know, since the end of March and up to this point we spent over £50,000 this year. So getting back to doing, you know, I could almost sit here and say, you know, I'm delighted not to have spent your money, but that's not what it's about. And thankfully, in the 21-22 year, we sort of returned to action. So at the end of the year last year, in 2021, our bank accounts told, we have two accounts, sort of £200,000. We look like we're very well off, but I can assure you that is not the situation as I sit here today, towards the end of the 21-22 year. But as I say, it's a smaller presentation. You would have received a report from me, which would have filled it out a little bit. But it's the last one I will give to you after 8 or 9 years here as the treasurer of the Student Rugby Football Union. I can endorse the words that Bob used earlier, that we're in a far better position in terms of structure and organisation and the kind of areas we support and how modern we look in terms of our profile and the kind of activities in which to pursue and support. So I'm delighted I've managed to not bust us in that time. I think we're quite a healthy organisation. And, you know, I know my successor, Rob, who's involved in the student world, I know that we as a group will continue to spend the money on what it's all about, which is trying to help and develop the student game for men and women at the universities in England. That's all I've got to say. I said there's more information in the report, but thank you for listening to me, and thank you also for your predecessors for having to put up with me over the last 8 or 9 years. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you.
Stu, thank you very much, and thank you for all your service. So greatly appreciated. Okay, before we draw the AGM to a close, there's a couple of matters that we need again some participation in from you guys. So the first thing that I'd like to do is a recommendation that the organisation Bash Brown and Co continue as the auditors for the SRFU. So the work that Stuart has just talked through is independently audited, and this happens on an annual basis as part of our governing documents. So it's our recommendation that we approve Bash Brown, and just looking for some hands to support that. Brilliant, thank you. That's passed. If we just move forward, Mark. And then the second thing that we need to do is the approval of the trustees and the officers. So you'll see the trustees on the screen there. I referenced we had some new colleagues join the trustee board over the year. So that's Shaunagh Brown, who you'll hear from shortly, and Rosie Williams. So they joined as our female game representatives, and then Megan Beddoe and Daisy Hopkins joined us as sort of student game representatives, and we're delighted to have them on board, and they've made a really good impact already. Our officers are the president, the vice president, the secretary, the treasurer, and the chair, and all, with the exception of Stuart, are seeking or have put themselves forward for re-election. Nobody else was put forward. So again, as part of this process, we're looking for approval from you of the trustees and officers for the 22-23 season. Just by a show of hands. That's great, thank you. Bob's already referenced the succession planning for Phil Atwell, who will step aside as council representative for next season, and that will be filled by Mark Hyman. And then just before we close the AGM, the last thing that we wanted to recommend to use the membership is the inviting Phil Atwell and Stuart Wade, who you've heard about already, as honorary life members of the SRFU. So we're not looking for approval for that. We're just sort of notifying you as the membership, and they'll join the likes of Derek Morgan, Ron Teneke, and Elvin, who've sort of long-standing and committed advocates of the student game. Before I close and we move on to the Q&A panel, does anybody have any burning questions that they'd like to ask any of the speakers today? Fantastic. So at 3:56 we'll close the AGM, and we will move forward to what I'm sure is the attraction of the day. So I think if Carlsberg were to pull together a Q&A panel for an SRFU AGM, I don't think they'd do much better than who we've been able to invite for today. So I'd just like to invite Shaunagh, Mel, Claire and Amy to join up. So Shaunagh, you'll be very familiar, is England Roses player, Harlequins player and a trustee of the SRFU. Mel, delighted, has been recently appointed our EDI lead for the SRFU. Clare Cooper is the England Rugby National Growth Manager for Women and Girls. And then finally, Mark's already mentioned her name, Amy Turner, who is the England Women's Under-20 head coach. So what I'm going to do is going to ask them in turn just to spend a couple of minutes introduce themselves in a bit more detail, some of the work they're doing at the moment. Then we've had some questions sent in already, so I'm just sort of going to facilitate that. And then sort of the last 10 minutes, we'll just open we'll just open up the floor. We're looking to finish as pretty promptly at 4:30. So, Shaunagh, I'm just going to hand over to you as sort of to say hello and a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's morning for me where I am. But so my section is around the documentary on Amazon Prime, No Woman, No Try, and the kind of challenges around the women's game for us as professionals. And the biggest thing for me that people should take from that is the honesty and the having conversations. So I've had so much feedback, even literally until today, from men and women, younger people as well, literally just saying thank you. Like, there's so much I didn't realize, especially men. So men who are involved in the game somehow, whether they coach or they're in the admin or, you know, their wives or daughters play, just saying there's so much around the struggles that I didn't realize as a man, even though I'm involved in the game. Just you saying it out loud just made me realize almost. And so for me, that means us as women and girls are not talking about it enough. And if somebody asks you, like, what is the state of the women's game at your club, your specific club, like, let's keep it local, or your specific university, I truly believe you owe it to them to be honest. And if things aren't fantastic, tell them. But even if things are fantastic, you can tell them that as well. But just be honest about it. Just say, well, like, we've had cold water in the showers for the last few games. That's not good enough. We never get to play on the first team pitch. That's not good enough. Like, we have to feed ourselves and the boys get fed. That's not good enough. So it's just about being open and honest and talking to each other as well, because there'll be struggles that, you know, one of the girls are having, but maybe they don't want to say anything because they don't want to be the person who puts their head above the parapet. Actually talk to each other and realize everyone's having that issue. So maybe now we can bring it to somebody else. But also, when things are good, tell them, like, tell whoever's in charge, tell them, like, I really appreciated, like, we had hot water this week, fantastic, or the food was better after the game this week, or like whatever situation is, like, good and bad, just keep talking, just keep being honest, and let people know the situation, like, and how it is today. But also, if you're the person who is the change maker, the person who does make those decisions, you can also ask for feedback as well. And it shouldn't just always be like people almost looking up and either having a moan or like being positive about something. It should also be people asking as well. So it's just, it works both ways, that the conversation, have develop that relationship where you can be honest with each other, and even when you are given, you know, work on or negative feedback, you do it in a sensible adult way. Like, you're not just saying things are rubbish, you say, well, it's rubbish because, and give them specific things with your ideas as an individual or as a group to work on. So yeah, for me, it's just about honesty, keep talking in a situation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shaunagh. What a great start. Amy, can we come to you next?
Hello, everyone. Just a quick sort of overview of what I do and where I'm at. I am England Women's Under-20s coach, and I am looking forward to working with the universities, and I've been working closely with Mark Hyman over the last sort of 2 or 3 months, and building a relationship and recognising talent within the staff group of the university setup, where we can find new talent within the player pool that we haven't seen before. So from COVID, we've recognised that there's a gap of eyes on players coming through the university setup and or the pathway from under 18s to 20s, and we're trying to fill that gap and work with the universities to ensure that we see as many players as possible and give them the opportunity for selection for under 20s moving forward. So a big hello, looking forward to listening to some questions and answering, hopefully, or clearing up or creating some clarity on what we're trying to do this season.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. And then Mel, if we come to you next.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, everyone, really glad to be here. For me, University Rugby had a huge impact both on my life as a sports person and also more widely. So really keen to make an impact. As touched on already, I've taken on the role of EDI lead, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion lead at the SRFU. So I wanted just to run through very briefly sort of my vision for how I want to change how we work within the SRFU. We have to practice what we preach. My aspirations for how to communicate with you all, and my ideas for how I and we can support you. So first of all, very briefly, in terms of ways of working, I'm really looking to make sure that we're embedding EDI thinking in how we operate at the SRFU. So whatever it is that we're working on, that there is always an element of thinking about the EDI implications for it and addressing those. I'm looking to put together a formal statement, a kind of strategy for how we want to approach EDI. So I'll be looking forward to getting feedback from members on that, and also looking outward and engaging with other organisations, sharing best practice, being a really collaborative organisation. So for us internally, that's what I'm looking to do. In terms of how we communicate with you, already touched on briefly there. Thanks, Mark, about the steering group I'm looking to set up on EDI. That will be a sort of smaller, more closed discussion group, both some university partners and also members from the wider rugby landscape, National Youth Council, for example, other rugby leaders, and some charities as well. So looking forward to that, and that will be really a space for us to test and challenge what we've looking to provide and produce, and make sure we're inviting challenge and a diverse range of views. Must stress, I'm also keen for people to reach out individually as well. I'll drop my email in the chat afterwards. Even if you're not involved in the working group, your voice is very valuable, and I'd like to hear from you if there's anything you want to sort of test with me. And finally, how we can support you. So there's already been a mention of the toolkit that we're putting together. For those who perhaps aren't familiar with this, what it is a kind of self-diagnosis toolkit almost for clubs who are sort of aspiring to be real EDI leaders, which lists things you want to be considering, how you can assess yourself, and how you can make steps to improve EDI in your club. It's things like how you're listening to your members, how your leaders behave, what you're doing day to day, how are you making inclusion part of the everyday rugby experience, and how are you reflecting as well. So we'll be testing this toolkit with a smaller group of unis, getting a sort of an iterative process, I suppose, of feedback at the end of the season, and then looking to roll it out more widely. Finally, just I guess in terms of wider resources, I'm really keen to be ambitious and think about other kinds of resources we can give you. Things like how to do inclusive socials, how to make training as inclusive as possible, and even content around recruitment that we can provide for you to use on social media. So you're making sure your marketing is really inclusive. Pretty much all from me. I think finally, just to say, I want to be really creative and wide thinking about what diversity means, and making sure we're really being imaginative about what we should be focusing on. And it goes without saying, again, the more voices I hear from and can represent, the more of an impact we can have. So I'm keen to have anyone contact me, any ideas, and also to celebrate things that you do. So if you think you're actually doing a smashing job, let me know. I'd like to hear about it, and I'd like to get other people hearing about it as well. So I'll drop my email in the chat. Please do feel free to contact me, and looking forward to working for you all.
Thank you, Mel. And then finally, from our intros, I'd like to invite Clare forward. Clare.
Thanks, Paddy. Really good to hear from the other panelists there as well. Thank you for inviting me along today. So yeah, I'm the National Growth Manager for Women and Girls. We're in a particularly exciting period of time at the moment. We've had actually a really strong return from COVID, with numbers increasing on the playing front. Obviously, the Red Roses' success through this season, their continued run of good form, and we've seen fantastic crowds across stadiums across England. So we're really starting to build our fan base on our road to 2025. So my job specifically is around implementing the Every Rose action plan, and there are 4 key pillars within that plan, which are accessible, successful, visible and commercially viable. And our bid to host the 2025 World Cup is a key element of being able to achieve all of that by 2025. So there's a huge amount of plans going in already. We're starting to talk about the legacy plans and what that looks like. We've got a huge amount of investment coming into the game, which is really, really positive, and hopefully will address some of the challenges that Shaunagh and others identified in the No Woman, No Try piece. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and really excited to start talking to you all about it.
Thank you, Claire. So I think everybody agree we're in very safe hands for the next 25 minutes or so. So I've got some questions that have been sent in, and I'm going to work through some of those now. If you have something, just sort of use the next 10-15 minutes to have a think, and use the chat as we said at the start. So Amy, I'm going to come to you first, if that's all right. And there's been a couple of questions. One around, can you talk a little bit more about the pathway opportunities for under-20s next year? And then there's another question about how do you try out for the England Women's 20s programme?
Yeah, so what I've recognised, or what we've recognised within the under-20s programme over the last 2 years, given the fact that COVID has been a massive factor to who we can see and how we can see them, we want to adjust and evolve our selection process, and the way we are looking to do it at the moment, hence why I have reached out to Mark Hyman and tried to get the universities involved and create a relationship between us both, is because we've had a really small net over the last 18 months of player cohort. So we have worked with under 18 players that we know of that have come through our pathways and have come of age into our under 20s projects, and have evolved into players within our AP15s. However, because of COVID and the restrictions around playing regularly within any other setup that isn't elite, we've missed a quite a large cohort of players around talent ID perspective. So what we are trying to do this year, and what we hope to get out of the new way we're looking at the selection process, is to cast our net a lot wider. So we are looking to do from September, late August until September, a nomination process which we will be working with, and information will come out to university rugby representatives around this process, and that will be from late August until mid-September, so around 3 or 4 weeks. We're looking at a nomination process. We'll send a nomination form out to 17 universities, and they will be the Women's National League and the Premiership Bucks League North and South. So it's 17 clubs or student union clubs altogether that we'll be hoping to get nominations from, around players who they believe are of the standard to be in contention for an under-20 spot. Off the back of that, we will divide a training camp, which will be a day camp north and south. We will have 3 day camps that will be on different dates through the month of October and early November. And they will be led by a set of identified coaches that we're going to get to work with the group. Off the back of that will be a selection process to a squad of 23 per north and south, and they'll play a fixture which will be the same date or as the World Cup final, with a central venue to accommodate that. The relationship with the university, so we're looking to hold the training venues to be at university venues if it works geographically, and then to have our main game, so our North v South game, to be at a university venue that's central to the country, so that is easily accessible. And we also are promoting the facilities that the universities have nationally, which will be a really positive thing. And obviously off the back of that, we would want representatives to come and watch, showcase their support and talk about it via social media. That's the start point for this season. As we move on, there'll be a massive amount of conversations and evolution. We've got Mark Saltmarsh, Mark Hyman talking through how we can establish a consistent relationship and B, evolve this into something that is more permanent. And I'm excited to see where that goes. But as it stands at the moment, this is an England Rugby under-20s selection process with the assistance of the universities to build on something moving forward into the future. So a really positive thing. It's the start of a process. There'll be a lot of reflection, a lot of feedback, and a lot of growth within the relationship between the universities and England Rugby under-20 selection process. So that's where we're at the moment.
Great, thank you very much. Mel, I've had a couple of messages directly to me from sort of people I know in the game asking about how do universities get involved with the pilot, and does it include both men's and women's clubs or sections?
Yeah, very, very happy to jump in. So I think we are going to have to keep the toolkit pilot relatively small. The reason being we want to have sort of quite intimate discussions and go into quite a lot of detail about the experience of using it. So those universities that indicated their interest at the university forum will definitely be involved, and then we'll have sort of a secondary number. What I will do is get in touch with anyone that does contact me, just to let you know if you're in it or not. If you're not, that's not you sort of done. Certainly happy to keep you posted on sort of the developments as they go. In terms of men's and women's clubs, I would strongly advise clubs to make sure it's both elements of any university club being involved. A couple of reasons. First of all, EDI is a cross rugby issue. It's not something that men's or women's rugby should be tackling. It's across the sport. The other reason being that you may want, as part of EDI, want to be having some quite sort of sensitive, intelligent discussions about, for example, players, non-binary players, trans players, and those sorts of conversations I think can only happen if you're bringing both of the parts of the club together. So yes, I would be strongly encouraging clubs to have a one club approach and to engage with EDI in that way.
Thanks, Mel. Claire, when sort of England or the UK's hosted sort of previous big national focused events, university facilities have often been used as sort of training venues or playing bases. Is that sort of the similar lines of thinking for the forthcoming World Cup?
Potentially. We're at very, very early stages at the moment. We're right in between. We've had the event confirmed that England are the hosts. And what happens now is a local organising committee will be put into place. So that needs to be established first before we get into any of that level of detail, to be honest. But with, the matches will take place around the country. There'll be a big spread geographically, and we're looking at sort of hub venues and some showcase venues as well. But it's too early to say at the moment, I'm afraid. But yeah, we're correct that certainly 2010 we had, I think all the players were all at Surrey Sports Park. So I do foresee it being very different this time around. We're 15 years down the line, and the tournament will be the biggest it will ever have been, because it will be a 16 team tournament as well. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty more conversations to go on in the next 6 to 12 months to get that organised.
Cool. Thank you. Shaunagh, can we come to you now? We referenced no women, no try in your intro. Can you sort of give us a bit of an insight about how you got involved in it?
Yeah, of course.
Briefly talk us through your journey there.
Yeah, so the most simple answer to it is Victoria Rush sent me a message on Instagram saying she's had this idea would have liked to get involved. Like, she doesn't know what the end outcome would be. She just had an idea, would have liked to get involved. And I kind of just said, yeah, why not? Like, well, I've not got anything else on. And so that's actually how a lot of my opportunities and things that people see me doing now from the outside, a lot of those opportunities come just by saying yes to someone. And if I can't find a reason, like, I literally think, why not? And if I can't find a reason why not, then I say yes. And like, that's how I got into rugby. Like, that's how I got into being a trustee for the SRFU board. It's just saying yes to opportunities. And, you know, I could talk so much more about it, but literally Victoria Rush sent me a message on Instagram and I said yes. And I guess it does help the fact that I'm quite vocal about these subjects anyway. Away from that documentary, again, it's that whole honesty thing. Somebody asks me a question, I'll tell them, and sometimes I do think, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get away with this one, but it's the truth. So it's just, you know, being sensible with answering it. But essentially, I just said yes to an Instagram message from Victoria.
Simple, easy. And then you referenced your role as a trustee on the SRFU. Now that you've sort of been involved, I think 6 or 8 months now, do you think the board are doing enough to support the women's game? What else should we be thinking about?
Yeah, so short answer is yes. And I'm not one to settle for anything but the best across people, not just the women's game, but, you know, people in society. And one of our biggest issues, I think, as female rugby players, is just settling and thinking, oh, well, you know, at least we get to play, or at least we've got some water, like it might be cold water showers, but at least we get to play. But in terms of the new trustees who have come on board this year, like myself included, Rosie Williams as well, like, there's such a female presence, and even just here on this panel, it's entirely females. It just shows like where we want to go. And I know, Patrick, how hard you work to get Mel in as the EDI lead, and, you know, making sure we got the right person and not just taking anyone who applied. It's like, they're not suitable, that's fine, we'll wait, we'll go out till we get someone who is completely suitable and someone that we need, and as true for Mel. But yeah, I think the SRFU is in a good place, and of course there's work to do. There's a lot of work to do, but it has to start somewhere, and it is also a long process. So things don't change like after a couple of calls or even after a year or two. These things are like anything in life, is with money and investment. Like, this is investment in our time and investment in our thought. Like, you won't see the massive changes for potentially another 5 to 10 years. But even like the project with Amy Turner in under 20s, like, that's huge, being able to get that exposure. And, you know, all of these things take time. So I'm happy that the SRFU is in a good place, and my standards are pretty high. So I think that's a good sign.
Cool. Thanks, Shaunagh. This is a question to everybody. So you all have leadership and influence, either as administrators, players, coaches. If you were to give some tips or guidance for maybe current students who might want to either work as administrators or might go through the refereeing or coaching pathway, from your experiences, how do you answer that? I'm going to put Mel on the spot first. He's in my line of sight.
Thanks. Yeah, no worries at all. I think just two elements for me on that one. First of all, in my former life as a sports journalist, so one of my first things that I tried to do when I wasn't really getting much of a break in sport was to volunteer. So I volunteered for Scrum Queens as a videographer. Used to go down to England training when, you know, the mainstream press wouldn't necessarily show up, film my interviews with the coaches and some of the players, pop them online. Okay, they didn't get hundreds of views, but actually down the line, when I wanted to get into sports journalism, that I got taken seriously because I'd shown that I'd volunteered in my own time and gone and done what I was passionate about. So that would be one thing. If you're really keen, especially while you're at uni and you've got perhaps a little bit more space, get out there and volunteer and make a bit of a name for yourself. Second thing would just be about in my capacity as a referee now, sorry, I've joined the dark side, guys. So yeah, as a rugby referee, just have a go and be loud and be heard. So I went to my previous society that didn't know anyone but showed up, wasn't sure what reception I was going to get, and they were wonderful. They were overjoyed to have kind of a player and a female referee wanting to start. So kind of don't talk yourself out of something before you started. Shaunagh, you're in a Shaunagh and think, well, what's the worst that could happen, and have a go, because especially in rugby and the current climate, 99% of the time people are going to love the fact that you're keen. So those would be my two main points to make. Thanks,
Mel. Claire, anything from you?
Yeah, kind of echo what Mel said there. I guess I got to where I am today because I said, can I help you? So I wasn't asked, and I didn't say yes. I put forward, I said, well, why isn't that happening? You know, and it was at St Mary's University actually for a London women's trial, and Rosie had just arrived in England, and she was trying to coach and manage and administer and everything. And I said, oh, do you need a hand? Can I help you? And she's like, sure, mate, get involved. So, and that was it. You know, I was straight into the network, got to know people, followed people, learned from them. And actually one of the best pieces of advice I had was from Carol Ishwood. And I was desperate to work for the Rugby Football Union for Women back then. And she said, don't come yet, go and do something else, go and work in wider sport, go and you know, spread your wings a bit. So I was a research consultant for sports consultancy for 3 years. So kind of got my foundation there, and then found my way into rugby. And you know, I've been here 15 years now and loved every minute of it. But if I hadn't have, you know, sort of put my hand up or put my head above the parapet and said, I want to come and help, then, you know, I would have maybe taken a different path. So yeah, a bit of what Shaunagh said as well. We just need to say yes. Don't be afraid, get stuck in.
Great, thank you. And Amy, from your perspective?
Yeah, I suppose I've got a little bit more of a unique perspective. I came from the world of a dual career, so I was a rugby player alongside being a police officer, and that was my life for well over a decade. And I had to manage both, so I had to manage my career and ensure that I was doing what was required for me as a police officer, but I also needed to be elite and be the best that I could be in terms of a rugby player. And that will be the reality, I think, for a lot of females who want to get into the wider game that aren't necessarily elite players. So they're thinking about refereeing or they're thinking about coaching. They're going to have to dual manage perhaps careers that they're doing day to day alongside the aspiration of wanting to be in rugby in some capacity. And that's the one thing I would say is be honest with yourself and make sure you've got a balance. And the balance being that you are managing your time effectively, so that you can do both well. And where there is opportunity to grow your capacity within rugby, be honest with your employees and employers, so that you have the opportunity and you can take those opportunities without feeling stressed or conflicted in any sort of way. And that was something that I definitely battled with as a player, for sure. And the second point would be look on the resources that England Rugby have around how to stay in the game, whether you love the game and you're not sure where the next route is for you. Ensure that you look at what's available in terms of upskilling yourself, whether that's refereeing, whether that's a coach, whether that's volunteering at your local club, whatever it may be, but just making sure that you look at the resources that are available on England Rugby. I've been very fortunate enough to make rugby my career now. So I've stepped away from policing full time. I'm no longer a police officer, and I'm a full-time performance coach, and the only female performance coach within England Rugby. And I take that very seriously, and I take that as a massive kudos to my effort that I've put in to make sure that I'm the best that I can be. And giving your time to other females that have the similar aspirations to be in the performance realm of coaching, whether it's England Rugby, whether it's domestic leagues, whatever it may be, being a support network for them, and putting yourself forward to being a mentor or just a sounding board for those who come across your sort of, you know, you cross paths with as a professional. And I think giving them time, so giving other females time or other aspirational coaches time, but also having a balance if you're juggling two different careers, one rugby, one, you know, normal day-to-day life. It's important to have the balance.
Great, thank you, Amy. And then finally, Shaunagh, on this question.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I can really add to that is around sacrifice, and Amy touched on it in terms of something has to give. You can't be at, I don't know, you can't be at parties one night and expect to play well the next day at a game. You can't do loads of little jobs. Like, you can't sometimes, unfortunately, do a full-time top-end university degree and then play the highest end. Like, some people can, but some people can't. It's just about managing your time and realizing that you have to sacrifice potentially going to see family. You have to sacrifice attending your own birthday parties sometimes. Like, the amount of elite players who just miss things because we're either away or even just at training. You think, oh, it's only training, but no, it's a training session. Like, you have to give up so much to be at the top. And so, yeah, there's just a lot around sacrifice and missing. We miss a lot in socially, but also with work. And like, again, I've come from a background of working alongside elite, not only rugby, but athletics before that. And it's just a sacrifice. There's a lot of it, and we've all had to do it. And if you want to get to the top, you have to do it too.
Thank you. Right, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to open the floor. If anybody has a question they'd like to ask the panel, can you either just sort of raise your hand or put something in the chat. So I'll just give it a few seconds to think. Don't be shy.
We've silenced the room.
Oh.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
Right, so Kit from UEA has asked, as Ugo Monye mentioned inclusivity within rugby this week around drinking culture, do you have any ideas about improving inclusion within our recruitment this year in university rugby? Mel, I'm going to come to you on that one, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things I've been doing quite a lot of thinking about over the summer. I think it starts with your first impression you give at Freshers Week and in your on-screen comms as well on your presence. So if your Facebook is all about Ring of Fire, drinking, that's immediately going to give an impression about how how your culture is as a club. Whereas if you make it clear that perhaps your first social meeting isn't going to be around a pub or a bar, but it's something, maybe a daytime activity, group activity, that kind of thing, I think that sets out a really good impression. And I think just making sure that when you're greeting people at Freshers Fairs, which I assume is still another in-person way of recruiting, that again you're dialing down the kind of sort of alcohol focused, I guess, marketing, and when you're talking about the sorts of things that you do socially. So I think just that first point of contact is really important, and then obviously going through the season, making sure that you do consider maybe those that don't drink for whatever reason when you're working out how to bond as a team. Not to say it can't be a part of the culture, of course it can, but just making sure it's not the only way to celebrate.
Great, thank you, Mel. Right, we committed to finishing on time at 4:30. So just before I draw to a close, I'm just going to ask that our panelists if there's any sort of closing remarks they'd like to make. So Amy.
Firstly, thank you for letting me be involved in this AGM and the Q&A as a result. If any coaches, there will be an email sent out to the Women's National League coaches over the next sort of week to 10 days, as well as our Premiership, Bucks Premiership sides that are North and South. So there is a collective of 17 university clubs that we'll be sending information out about our nomination process. In the interim, until you get that email, if you have any questions or you want to pick up a conversation with me about individuals or the process, then just give me a shout via email, which is purely amyturner@rfu.com, and no doubt that contact will be shared and I can share it in the chat group. But that's ultimately anything from me. Like I say, if you want to contact me and talk or discuss what we're doing in terms of under-20 selection process and the North-South days, give me a shout. Happy to chat through anything with anyone.
Thanks, Amy. And Claire?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just reiterate, thank you for the invitation today. And I'd just add, you know, we've got a very, very busy 3 years and 5 years really coming up, and there will be an enormous amount of opportunities for people to get involved in coaching or starting to be match officials and getting into volunteering and leadership, particularly from universities. So we're really keen to work with you on that in the next few years, and equally the leadership piece is about supporting our community clubs as well. We want to really try and help that connection. So yeah, it's kind of watch this space at the moment, but put your hand up and get involved.
Oh, I think we might have lost
Paddy frozen.
We've lost Paddy. Shaunagh, you go next.
Yeah, so I guess my main message is how I started, is just to be honest, have open conversations, have it both ways, talk about things that are great, because there is a lot of fantastic stuff happening and what works well for you and your team, but also be honest when things aren't so great, and just come together, like just develop those relationships where you can be completely honest and you feel like you're in a safe space with each other. But also, if you're the person at the top who is able to make those decisions, be brave to ask for feedback. And when you do get honest feedback, take it and use it properly, because one thing is, if you give feedback and you still see no change, that's very frustrating, and you think, well, what's the point? Next time I won't bother. So it works both ways. Just talk to each other, be honest, and have open conversations.
Noting that Patrick's now off the call, just for me finally, just to say, obviously really keen to be getting out support and tools and products to you guys, but also to hear from you. So like I say, you know, I'm sure there's some fantastic stuff going on in the EDI space amongst clubs. Please let me know, drop me an email, tell me about it, you know, tweet me, Instagram me, whatever it is, and we can make sure that it's been amplified and shared and highlighted to other universities. So I think that would be it from me.
Brilliant.
Anyone else? Yeah. Oh, you back?
I've dived in, Mel, to save Paddy. Technology's got the better of us just over the time. But as chairs the SRFU, I just want to say thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone on the call is really taking something away from that. I'd also like to thank everybody that's attended today. It's really great numbers to attend the AGM and the panel talk. The last two thanks I've got before we let everybody go. Well, three thanks since he's back. So thank you for Paddy for steering us through this, and I'm sure he'll be going to get a new Wi-Fi router after this. But also thanks to Elisa, that's done all the administration around this and made sure we present ourselves correctly, and also a thank you and a goodbye to Bobs, who's been with us as our communications lead at the SRFU. Definitely evolved our social media over the years, and all our content that's gone out to you. Bobs leaves us today, as well as AGM was a last act. Everybody have a wonderful summer. If anyone has any questions or wants the SRFU to be doing more in any areas, you know, please contact us. Go to our website, complete on the contact forms, or email info@studentsrfu.com. But otherwise, have a great, safe summer, and we'll see you, well, probably mid-August, to be honest, if not September. And looking forward to a really exciting Bucks season and everything else we've got going forward. Thanks all. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone.